Okay, here's something I want you to do for this next week to help practice the assessment skills. For this first kind of walkthrough, I want you to grade some fake science data that's based off of one of those videos we watched about the bats in Dubnar Cave in Tennessee, where they have white nose syndrome. And as part of that, the students are given this data sheet about the year and the bat population. And they are supposed to create a graph that represents that data accurately. They're supposed to write a caption, and they're supposed to justify why they made the kind of graph they did. To go with this, and there are about 16 or 15 actually different sheets here with people like Conway Twitty, he's a country singer, Luke Skywalker, Frodo Baggins, Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, Job Bluth from Arrested Development, and Benjamin Button, that movie character who went backwards in time. So you have a bunch of people, right? They have different objectives. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. Objective 1 is that students will be able to construct a graph with a title, axis, labels, appropriate scale, and accurate data representations based on the data that they get. That's captured in question 1. So what I'd like you to do is go through these and grade them. And using the 4-3-2-1 system, I'm going to leave it up to you where people fall. But how many students exceeded the standard? How many students met the standard? How many students partially met? And how many students just did not even come close, didn't even get a sniff, so to speak. Do that for each one of the objectives. So you look at all the graphs, see how many people graded on a 4-3-2-1 scale, and then put how many people fell into each category here. Then go on to question 2. Students will be able to write a caption that explains the relationship represented by a graph. Now, what's going on here is that the bat population is being cut in half roughly every year, and this is in thousands, so that's important for this graph part. And so the proper interpretation is really that about half of the bats in Tennessee are dying each year from white nose syndrome. Some students might say that more bats die each year. It's kind of true, but kind of not true. Some students will say that fewer bats die each year, right, which is true in one sense, but not really true in another, kind of misleading. And so the real answer is that the proportion of bats that are dying each year is about 50%, and that's equal over the years. Students are supposed to then represent, I will leave it up to you then to decide who fails, who partially, who meets the standard, and if anyone exceeds the standard. Finally, explain why you chose the type of graph you did. Students will be able to describe why a type of graph is appropriate for the type of data that is being represented. In this case, line graphs are the one that represent changes over time. Bar graphs do not. The bars themselves mean that these are actually different categories or different types of things. Otherwise, they would be right next to each other in what is called a histogram. Little graph knowledge for you. Pie graphs, we can assume that is another one that they learned about. That's good for showing proportions or relative proportions. Bar graphs are good for relative frequencies. Line graphs show changes over time, so line graphs are what should be used. It's the right kind, but note that there are a few things missing here, like a title, axis labels, whether or not this is appropriate scale or the 0 point should be there. Those are things you're going to have to decide how much they count. So again, identify how many students have a good justification and met or exceeded the standards, how many students partially met, how many students did not meet. Okay. Once you grade and tabulate this data, then I'd like you to describe the quantitative patterns using this frame. Okay, and this is what you should actually use when you do the EdTPA eventually. And if you look at the Perfect EdTPA assessment commentary on Canvas, it does the exact same thing. It's really boring to write this way, but it gets the job done. It's really easy to follow. So In this case, and actually this is just an example I was pulling out, for the first objective, constructing a graph. X of X students, you'll fill in your numbers here, either met or exceeded the standards. And again, you want to first identify how many people made it over the bar you set. And then you get a little more detail, with this many meeting and this many exceeding. Of the students who did not meet the standard, this many partially met and this many did not. And then you write that exact same sentence for objective 2, filling in the numbers appropriately in the objective, and you do the same thing for objective 3. This is really easy to do. I imagine everyone will get this right. I'm not going to worry about the specific numbers you have here. I'm worried about just whether or not you can translate what you put in this table down into this. Then I want you to look at the qualitative patterns. So, for example, if people don't get a 3 on this, why didn't they get a 3? What are all the issues that students are having? What are the most common issues that students have? And for this first one here, right, one of the mistakes that everyone makes is that they don't put a title. That's part of the goal. And so the question is, are you going to have anybody even who met the standard, if that was part of the standard? Then you might have some other things here, something down here, maybe the dates here, the scale used here, the number of tick marks, as they call them, and so on. So there's a lot to choose from. Fewer things down here and here, but you will be looking for at least 2 things for each objective, 2 basically reasons why students aren't meeting the objective. And then fill those in here. These are expandable as you type in them, and then submit that onto Canvas. But that's it for this week. Pretty light week. I will be looking at modifications to the lesson plans, and for next week I will have the second part of this assessment analysis, and I will have another lesson plan thing for you to do, although it will be a wholly independent thing. You can work with group members if you want, but you still will be graded based on those skills that you are assigned. More on that next week. Have a good week. I hope people who celebrated Passover and Easter had a good holiday.